later you are going to run into, on real projects, you'll run into issues with project manager or getting the correct GPK to show up inside of drainage. So there's a couple of areas that I wanted to point out here. If you are opening up the road project, such as we have here, if you go to project, you don't have to do any of this, but if you were to go to project edit, these projects all have a working directory built in. If it's specifying a specific directory, that's where it's going to look for the GPK file, is in this working directory. So if you're working on a drainage project and you're setting up that project and you can't get it to access the right GPK file, this is an area where you can fix that. There is another setting here, though. If I click Preferences and I click on COGO Preferences for this project, here's the main working directory, but underneath that there's a COGO Preferences, and there's a separate preference that you can set for the GPK file that overrides this guy right here. So the only places that are going to control where GEOPAK Drainage, GEOPAK Road, all of the older GEOPAK tools are going to look are here in the working directory and then here in the job GPK directory. So you're going to open up older projects or existing projects, and either that working directory or that job GPK directory is sometimes going to be pointed in the wrong spot. Those are the two places where you can go in and fix that if needed. Your best option for these, at least in general, is if you just leave the working directory blank and the job GPK directory blank, GEOPAK's going to look in your currently open folder as far as your drawing. So the reason they were using this portion here is they wanted to make sure that working directory was set to roadway. So if we need to later, we'll go back and we'll reopen that SR61 drainage project. We'll pick the student, and then we'll just minimize that road project dialog box if we end up needing to do that. I think we're going to be okay not doing that, though. I think we'll be perfectly fine not doing that. So if you want to back out of that whole thing altogether, you can, and then we'll just proceed from there. But you'll see those same steps for the most part at the beginning of each and every chapter. So I think we'll be able to skip those. And then if you'll flip over to page 319, we're going to reopen GEOPAK Drainage from our Drainage Plans folder. It's going to be the first icon in there. Open GEOPAK Drainage. And then if you go to your project menu, you're going to pick Project Open. Or since that project is in the same location in the Chapter 3 files as it is in Chapter 1, you can probably go to Project Open to pick it, or at the bottom of that project menu, I think most of you will have the SR61 PRJ there. If you don't, just pick Project Open. It's going to go out to your roadway folder initially because of the working directory. You're going to go up one folder and then go into Drainage and open up this SR61 GDF file. It's almost always going to jump to 25%, jump to 75 and sit there maybe for a moment. And then I think everyone will get the message, check rainfall in preferences. And that's because we haven't set up or done any of our preferences yet. So if you get the check rainfall message, just click OK. And if you look at the top of your menu bar for drainage, it's going to say sr61.gdf. And then what we'll do is we'll go through, starting at step 9 here, all the different project preferences. So I'm picking project and then preferences. And there's a whole bunch of them. And some of the ones in the zip files are not going to match our folder structure. So we're going to, once we set up all these preferences, we're going to save them. And then that way we can reopen them at the beginning of each chapter and not have to rebuild the preferences all the time. So first preferences that you're going to see are the units. The GDF file, that GEOPAK drainage file, is similar to the GEOPAK GPK file in that it really doesn't have a unit built into it. It doesn't know whether to interpret the units in this file as English or metric. So you're going to see it should toggle by default to English, just like you see at the top of page 320. Shouldn't have to do anything there. And then we're just going to move down the left-hand side of this dialog box. And once we have all our preferences set up, we'll go ahead and save them so we can use them again later. So units should be fine. And now we're going to left click on project components. By far, the project components section has the most stuff to set up, and it's going to be the most important. If you're working on your production machines later and you want to set up a generic variety for preferences here, you would fill out everything at the top, and then for the bottom you could just leave the original ground and the design surface 10 files blank. Those are the main ones that will change from project to project. Typically the drainage library file, well, and the job number would also change. So project, as far as projects go, the GPK number changes and the original and design surface 10 files change. So if you're saving a generic preference file, fill out everything but the job number and the original and design surface, and that should be a pretty reusable set of preferences for you. So as far as our drainage library file, I think for all of us, if you were to click your magnifying glass, since these machines have everything installed locally, it should be pointing out to the C drive, GEOPAK databases, and this FDOT SS4 DLB. If you're working on in a district or on a CAD server of some type, that will probably point out to a network location most of the time. So you shouldn't have to do anything there at the very top for the drainage library file. For the GPK job number, you're going to click the little magnifying glass, and you're going to see two job numbers. The reason there's two job numbers is the roadway alignments and profiles in the roadway modeling get exported to a GPK file for use in plans production. So that's why there's two GPK files. The correct one for everything that we do is going to be this job00.gpk. Is that coming up for everyone? Okay. Now here's why I told you you could skip that whole project manager dance. On the right hand side here, if you click that little magnifying glass ever and you don't see the GPK file that you're looking for, you can click on user preferences here, and that would let you specify the working directory for drainage, and if you needed to, separate COGO preferences for drainage. So you could browse out and you could pick that roadway folder. If that GPK file didn't show up, then you hit the magnifying glass and then you can pick it. The drainage cell library, I don't think you'll have to do anything for this. This is the plan view of the inlets and manholes, and I think on all of these machines it's pointing just like mine is. It's pointing to the C drive, it's pointing to FDOT SS4 resources, and then cell, and it's pointing to the DR plan cell library. You shouldn't have to do anything there. So if you need that path for the cell library, you'll go into the C drive, the FDOT SS4 folder on the C drive, resources, and then cell, and you'd pick this drplan.cel if anyone needs that. And if you're looking at that screenshot in the book at the bottom of 320, you can definitely see where when they created the manual, they had a different, different drive letters and different structure. So this project preferences that we're creating and saving will end up loading each time we get into the different chapters because the zip files end up resetting it back to the D drive for most of these things. For your criteria directory, that's going to be blank, and you're going to click the little magnifying glass. This isn't picking a file, it's just picking a folder. And the folder you're going to pick will be FDOT SS4, and then GEOPAK, criteria, and then drainage. And I'll leave that up there because I know everyone is picking that individually. It's not picking a file, we're just digging down into the folder. So the folder you're picking here is GEOPAK, criteria, and then drainage. And you'll click OK. Of course, it's going to fill that out for you. Your DDB file for Design and Computation Manager, you'll click the magnifying glass next to that. And then that is going to also be in the C drive, FDOT SS4, the GEOPAK folder, and it's going to be under databases. Just make sure there's two of them in there. One's for right-of-way. You want to pick the one that says FDOT SS4.ddb. Are these computers showing the file extensions, if that helps? Okay. We don't have a water and sewer project to use. And really, truthfully here, we're not using this super elevation shapes file. If you are designing, you would use the super elevation shapes file because it can read the slope from the lane shapes and use that to calculate the spread section on the inlets, on the curb inlets. For our purposes, you can just leave that blank. And then we have a couple of original, or a couple of tin files. One is an original ground and the other is the proposed design. So even though with the proposed design we are creating a 3D model, that 3D model can be exported out to a tin file for our use here in drainage. So original ground, you'll need to click the magnifying glass and go into your survey folder. There's a GDTM RD01 tin file that's in there. And then for your design surface, the final design surface is in the roadway folder. And it's called SR61_final.10. So that's really our most important part that we'll fill out, that we filled out, and that will end up reloading when we save these preferences in a little bit here. If you want to get those extensions back on, down at the bottom of Windows, if you start typing folder and pick File Explorer options, it should be at the top of the list. Go to View, and then uncheck the, where the heck is it? Uncheck this one that says Hide Extensions for Known File Types. So I'm on the View tab of that. And that's for anyone else that might want to do that. It drives me crazy if I don't have the file extensions. You really want to have them because with the modeling process, you'll have like a GDTM RD01 DGN file, and then there'll be a GDTM RD01.10 file. So I really depend on the extensions for a lot of stuff. And those are still, you know, the 3-character extensions. But now we got a lot more than 8 for the file names. All right, that way everyone will have the extensions. It makes it a whole lot easier, especially with us going to save these preferences in a little bit. All of the dialogues that have a file and has a save as to save the settings in the dialogue, there's all kinds of weird extensions they have. So next thing we'll pick here's the rainfall parameters over at the top of 321. For those of you that are drainage designers, what's a realistic zone for Tallahassee? I have no clue. Four's a good one? I think it's 3. 3? We'll go 3. It's not. It's not 4. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's 3. I can't remember. That'll work. That's okay. Yeah, it's in. That's a valid answer. That's even a valid answer in interviews. What's the zone for this district you're interviewing for? That's why you have a drainage manual. Oh, yeah. I don't know. You got to know where to find it. Exactly. That's what I learned in engineering school. That's where to find it. Nothing is, Florida DOT uses nothing SCS method, so it's all this rainfall, it's all the rational. So we'll pick zone 3 there. Seems like a good one. We'll use that. We won't tell any, well, actually I was going to say it's all a guess anyway, but it's the best guess because it's from historical, data. So it's the best guess we can make on how much rain is going to hit a certain area. So we'll pick zone. Let's make it 10 inches per hour. That's for 2 hours. Of course, you might spend a little bit extra on pipes, but yeah. And our ponds will be giant. It's only land and concrete pipes, All right, so the next section here is your land use options. You don't have to do anything here at all, even if we use some of the symbology later to look at areas and automatically assign the runoff coefficient to the areas. So you won't have to do anything here on the land use options at all. You can create your own here for the rational method, and you can have it pick up a certain level, color, line weight, and style. I don't think you'll ever need to use this. If you were adding an item where you had a certain color, line weight, level, and style, and that had a runoff coefficient assigned to it, the right way to do that and add it would be in the drainage library itself. So it wouldn't be here. So this, nothing to do. And that's here over on about the middle or lower part of 321. For the frequency options, this is your storm year. You only use the top part here, the rational, and we're picking a 3-year, and the peaking factor is going to be 1. In the drainage manual and in the Chapter 20 technical reference manual of this book, there are suggested frequencies, and there's more information, more technical information than we need here to do plans production. The intensity option, so this is over at the top, or excuse me, middle of page 322. Your minimum TC, time of concentration, is going to be 10 minutes. And then the intensity option is compute intensity from library rainfall data source, meaning that zone that we picked. Next section here is at the top of 323, which is the junction losses. And we're going to just say disable all junction loss computations. My understanding, and from what I've seen, is that these numbers, the loss coefficient at K, they do come up fairly correct according to the drainage manual as you're using this. Right now we're just disabling all the junction loss computations. And then just kind of moving down the list here again, your inlet options is set here at the bottom of 321. The bypass options is bypass as total discharge. We are not allowing inlet bypass and link discharges. And then the default spread in value. The book has, and this is probably from the drainage manual, 0.016. My default that comes up is 0.015. So if you want to change that N value to 0.016, you can.
Yeah, what that is the 1.5 is more of a concrete, and 1.6 is closer to asphalt.
Okay.
Use more asphalt.
So 1.6 is a little smoother.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
No,
it's rougher. Okay.
Yeah.
And probably wouldn't make. Yeah.
It's not going to make much of a difference at all.
Gotcha. And then you'll check on extend super elevation shapes to inlet at shape slope. What that is referring to is if we are designing and we're looking at the inlet spread and looking at those reports, if the super elevation shapes, the graphical shapes, don't quite extend all the way out to the inlets, it's just going to continue that same slope. That's what it's talking about with this check mark here. Node options at the top of 324. We're just specifying what we want our nodes to be called by default. And we're going to start them with capital S and a dash. So when we get to the point where we're defining nodes, it's going to do S-1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then the freeboard is 1.125. Where the 0.125 is coming from is the 1.5-inch gutter depression at the curb inlets. And that's because of, well, it's from the drainage manual and also from this note right in the middle of page 324. And then we'll move into the link options. Our default link names are going to be pipe dash, pipe 1, 2, 3, 4. And really, well, I was going to say really these settings don't matter for plan production, but they do because they affect how things are drawn. So design is going to be minimum depth of cover. At the actual link end, you'll change that. It's not at the hydraulic center. We're designing for maximum capacity. Our link slope decimal, we're going to set the rounding to 2. And then the link criteria file, this is what controls the drawing of the links in a profile view. And I think the cross section as well, but definitely the profile view. You're going to browse out to the drainage folder. It probably should take you right there because we already specified the drainage criteria file. And it's going to use pipe.x. So what you're picking is the criteria file is a program. You're picking the program this will use to draw pipes. And it's pipe.x. So the only things you're changing on here is the elevation option is at the actual link end. The link slope decimal you're setting to 2 places past the decimal. And then you're picking the link criteria file to be pipe.x. Profile options. We're not creating any profiles, but if you flip over to page 325, we are going to check on the default profile ID prefix, just in case we do one. It would start out with PRO dash. So profiles would be called PRO 1, 2, 3. You get the idea. This next little checkbox is worth everyone knowing about. If you don't check this, when you do create a profile in GEOPAK Drainage, if you are designing, or if someone else is designing, if you don't check this checkbox here, the profiles don't automatically get pushed and thrown over to that GPK file. They're not going to be accessible for someone to draw on top of the roadway profile later, or as its own profile later. And this is, well, you can see this is pretty darn buried in there. If I'm asked where the setting is for that, unless I've taught this last week, it takes me 5 or 10 minutes to remember where the heck this little checkbox is. If you're marking up your book, that screenshot does not have that checked. If you want to write a big old X on top of that, on page 325, you are more than welcome to do that. Excuse me. All right, so we're almost there. We're almost got all these filled out. When we go into plan symbology, this section here at the top of page 326 is what lets you override the standard drainage symbology as you're designing or as you're putting in elements such as areas, pipes, ditches, nodes, etc. for plan production. Excuse me. So what you want to do here is you want to set these areas, pipes, really just areas and pipes are the only things that we'll see. We want to set these to some type of miscellaneous level, but whatever color, line weight, and style works for us. So I'm going to double click on areas. It's already set to a level miscellaneous 0, and I wanted the areas red last week, style 0, and weight of 2, let's say. And I'll click OK, and that's going to go ahead and update the preview for that area section under linear. And then there's a little cheat you can do here. If you right click on this symbology, you can say copy, and then you can go over to the text and you can right click and say paste. That way you don't have to double click on the sample text. So I double clicked on the preview window there for linear areas. You can pick whatever you want. Whatever you want to pick is fine. I picked mine to be red and a weight of 2, left them on miscellaneous 0. And then I did a little cheat here. I right clicked after setting the area and I said copy, and I hovered over the text, right clicked, and did paste. And you'll see it go ahead and copy those settings for you. If you were sitting in a file that had those settings in there somewhere, actually had something drawn, you can right click over these previews and you can pick by element, and then you can go out and click on that element and set it to match that element. The only thing you might want to set here, and this is up to you, you can double click on the sample text and you can change how the justification is by clicking in this little box here if you wanted to. You don't have to. You could change the text height and text width. You don't have to. But this is the part that lets us design or put in elements and override what the normal CAD standards would be. And then way on down the road here, when we get to chapter 13, we'll go ahead and update these and override these settings and get it to the CAD standards. So I'm going to set that up for areas and pipes. I think I kind of like light blue for a pipe. I'll use a thickness of 3. You can pick whatever you want. And then I'm going to do a little cheat here. I'm going to right click and copy and paste. And maybe I'll make the areas weight of 3. You can do the same thing with ditches and culverts if you wanted to. There's no ditches in any of these exercises. There's no culverts in any of the exercises. So if you don't want to waste your time with those, you don't have to. And then for your node cell symbology, you're going to check on set node cell symbology. And what I would do here is I would set these to whatever color that you prefer. And I just set it the same for all of these. So I set one to orange, and then I'm just doing copy and paste for all these other ones. So I'm not even thinking about head wall outlets. Really the only things we're going to have is we're going to have inlets, we're going to have junctions, and we're going to have one outlet. So the other and the head wall, you don't really have to do if you don't want to. And you can pick whatever levels, color, line weights, and styles that you want to pick. The idea here is as we're entering elements or as we're designing or both, we're not stuck with the CAD symbology for drainage, which is it's all brown all the time. It doesn't stand out real well. So almost done. Now we can go to updates here at the bottom of 326. I would just check on everything. What these are all related to is as I make changes to nodes, as I make changes to my network, as I make changes to pipes, do I want to automatically update the database and all the graphics that go with it? Yeah, that's part of the power of having, the automated tools. And then one last setting over here on 327 is the save options. Automatically save drainage updates. So if you're changing nodes, changing links, changing things in the network, we're going to automatically save those changes. If you're kind of going through the network and reworking things and sort of playing with different scenarios, if we're designing and not necessarily wanting to save those changes, you could uncheck this, and then if you make some changes that are intended to make the network better but make it a whole lot worse, when you close out of GEOPAK drainage, you can choose not to save the GDF file. So there may be times you uncheck automatically save drainage updates. And I'm going to do automatic backup, automatic save. We'll do an auto save every 10 minutes. Book doesn't check on either of those. I would, because we may still get a chance to run our clear crash tools. And then you're going to see here that we can save these preferences out to an ASCII file. So this would be a good file to either print out or tell someone about if they wanted to see or needed to rebuild your drainage preferences. So what you would do is you would click OK here and close out of this. Before you do that, I would do one extra step. It's okay if you clicked OK already and bailed out of it. That's fine. You can always get back to project preferences by hitting project preferences. So what I would do, and this is true for just about any GEOPAK dialog that has a lot of settings in it, there's almost always a file menu. So I'm going to click File, Save As, and I'm going to go into my drainage folder here, and I'm going to call this SR61. This is not saving an ASCII printout of the settings. This is saving a settings file that we can hit file load later. And what it'll do is it'll rebuild our project preferences and overwrite those preferences that we'll keep getting from the zip files. So every time we start a chapter, we'll grab the zip files and we'll want to use this file and go ahead and keep using it to overwrite the zip file preferences. And that being said, to be a little more careful about this, since we are deleting that whole folder every time we swap chapters, you might want to just throw that out on the desktop or throw it into maybe CE projects. You probably don't want to have that in your projects folder, because once we start chapter 4, we're going to get rid of that project folder and then you'll lose that file. So I'm going to save this in my eProjects folder, call it SR61, and hit save. And then now you can click OK. There's always going to be a little delay there. And if you've made changes, it's going to prompt you, do you want to save the changes? You're going to hit yes. Okay. And now we can do the step here on page 327. Now you can hit Project Export, and you can say Export Preferences to ASCII. You can call it whatever you want. The book is calling it SR61_prefs.drp. And we'll probably go ahead and put that in e-projects as well. I don't think we'll need it, but we'll put it there. All right, so save this text file. If you wanted to look at it, it is just a text file, although it does have an odd extension. And you can just open it with Notepad or Word, whatever you want to open it up with. It has all the settings for your drainage project. Not a bad file to have around, not a bad file to print, but the other file is the more important one. The other file is more important because when we unzip these projects, we're going to go to Project Preferences. We'll pick File Open. We'll go up to our e-projects folder, and then all we have to do is pick that settings file and overwrite the zip file preferences. And that's a good one just to have around in general for any of your projects. It'll save you a lot of time, so you're not sitting here and chugging through all these settings every time. All right, so we'll get started here with Chapter 4. This is the Drainage Areas and Nodes section. Our node that we're putting in, we're not going to have to assign the area to it. We're going to assign really just a placeholder discharge, which is enough to get it to work for plan preparation. It's not going to be correct as far as designing. But this book, since it is used for the design classes and the plan preparation class, has both pieces in it. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and jump over to the exercise for entering the nodes for plan preparation purposes only. So if you'll flip to 426, we have a couple of nodes that we're going to go ahead and enter in, and that should give us enough information to be able to enter nodes manually if we need to. As I was talking with James here just a few seconds ago, my intent for today is to show you what you would have to do if you had to put in potentially everything manually and get it into GEOPAK drainage in order to work for plans preparation. You may never have to do any of that. You may just get handed a completed GDF file, and you could jump right into what we'll jump into tomorrow and immediately go to putting things on plans. So we don't know what situations you're going to run into, so we got to kind of show you the worst case scenario here, and maybe it doesn't end up being that, but we got to show you a way to handle it. So theoretically, and we're not going to do this, but if you look on page 425, this could be what we're handed, or similar to what we might be handed if we don't have anything at all already placed inside of GEOPAK drainage, and theoretically we would go in and place each one of these nodes with this node tool. And we put in the station, the offset, the type, node ID, the reference surface. We'd put all this information in as needed. We're just going to do one node, which will be a curb inlet, and we're going to do the outlet. So my thinking here is once you know how to put in this case, a couple of nodes, if you can do one or two, we could do a couple of hundred. So we're not going to sit there and spend hours inside of this node tool here. Excuse me. So as we've been doing before, you'll close out of SS4, and then we'll go ahead and get a clean slate with our files here. So I've been deleting the 220 project altogether. You might want to take a quick peek and make sure in the e-projects folder that you still have this SR61 DPF. That's going to be our preferences file. If you have that out on the desktop, it's fine. The only thing that's not fine is if you have that SR61 DPF still sitting in your drainage folder, because that's going to end up being deleted in a few seconds here. So we're going to need that preferences file for the rest of the chapters. So mine's sitting here in e-projects. If anyone ends up deleting that accidentally, I'll get it to you on the thumb drive, and we'll continue. So I'm going to delete my whole 220 folder, and then I'm going to go into the drainage zip files, and I'm going to find the Chapter 4 folder. Make sure you dig in far enough that your 220 folder doesn't have any number in parentheses to it, at least the one you're copying. And make sure that you do get at least a little bit of a progress bar as you copy that. If you see the progress bar when you copy it, then you should be good to go as far as it copied all of your files that you need. All right, so once you get those files updated, just go ahead and reopen SS4. It should remember that you're in the DRPRRD 01, and we'll just reopen that file and go through the node section here. So you'll reopen the proposed drainage file. Oh, thank you, sir. I would have got it later. Appreciate it. And then we're starting out here on 4-26. And there's some text up at the top of the page. And basically that first couple paragraphs is just telling you that, even though GEOPAK drainage is great for designing drainage systems, sometimes we just need to use it for plan preparation purposes. And that's what we're trying to show here in the next couple of days. So we're on page 426. We're using the Chapter 4 zip files. The only problem with that is the preferences in those zip files or in that GDF is not going to be correct. And that's why we save that preference file out there. So you'll go ahead back to your FDOT plans development task. And then from drainage plans, you're going to click on the first icon in drainage plans. It's going to reopen GEOPAK drainage. And then from the drainage menu, if you click project, it should remember, although it won't automatically reopen it, it should remember the SR61 GDF file you were using a little bit ago. So we'll reopen that project. You may get a couple of warnings of maybe like the criteria directory. You'll probably get a warning there. You'll just click OK to that. I think that's the only warning that you'll get. I think you'll get a warning about the criteria directory. What it's telling you is it's telling you that that criteria directory in that project from the zip files doesn't exist because there's no D drive, or at least there's not that file on the D drive. But that's why we saved our preferences. So now you're going to go to your project preferences, and from that preferences dialog, you're going to pick File Open. Now it's probably going to go way on out to the C drive under FDOT SS4 GEOPAK databases, and you'll have to go to your C drive, your E folder, your projects, and then that's why we save that DPF file. If anyone needs that, I've got a copy on the thumb drive if you need it. The main reason we save that DPF file, and I'll go ahead and open that, is that's going to load and reset our project components. So that way we don't have to go through this section every single time. So once again, from the preferences, you'll do a file open, and you'll open up that SR61 DPF. Now that preferences menu does remember the last DPF file that you loaded. So from here on out, excuse me, as we unzip files, you'll be able to open up the preferences and you can just go straight to file, and you shouldn't have to browse out to that DPF file anymore. It should remember it for you. You'll click OK on preferences, It's going to spin for a moment or two, and it should say drainage preferences have changed. Do you wish to store the changes? And we're going to hit yes, and it's going to close, and we're going to be ready to go. We'll go through that. Yes, sir. We'll go through those same steps each chapter. Unzip the files, open up the project, load the preferences. So that puts us here on the top of 426. And what we're going through here is simulating that we've been given some type of set of drainage structures or nodes, and they're not in GEOPAK drainage. So we've got to get them in GEOPAK drainage so we can go ahead and use these. So what you'll do is you'll go to your main menu. Oh, and let's see if we have some, you know what? Oh, one thing they skipped here when we jump to the plan prep portion, we need to reference in some files that we skipped over so we can at least see where we are. So we're going to reference in some files here. We don't need all of them, but if you look at the bottom of 417, we're going to reference in some files so at least we have some type of idea, you know, that our inlets are at least somewhere on the project. So if you flip back to 417, we'll reference those files. Bless you. And then we'll go ahead and create our node. So this is just regular plain microstation. It's happening here at the bottom of 417. We're going to reference in two files from the drainage folder. So references, tools attach.
Where's the references? How'd you get it in?
Okay, so to get to references, look for the little notepad looking icon.
Okay, up there.
Yeah. Or you can hit file references, but I think everyone will have the little notepad looking icon. So you go to file references or hit the little notepad looking icon. And then we'll go and pick tools attach. And you're going to attach the DR MPR D00, the drainage map file, and the existing drainage from the drainage folder. We'll take them one at a time. You can, since we're getting two files from that same folder, you can use Control to pick the files. I'm going to use the interactive attachment method. And then when I click open, I'm going to see this dialog box twice. You shouldn't have to even touch anything on the dialog. You can just click OK twice. And when you hit Fit View, you'll see the existing drainage, and you'll also see the drainage map. Our project, the area we're working in, if you did hit a Fit View, is going to be down and to the right. So the area that we're working in is down in this area here, where you'll see the drainage map referenced in, and some big giant drainage arrows. And then we'll also end up referencing in two files from roadway, and we'll probably leave the survey files off of there. We probably don't need the two topo files. Probably referencing in the roadway design may be enough. And you know, we do realize that we're not always going to have a complete roadway design to reference in here like we have in this project. You're going to be if you're designing potentially, you're going to be working alongside roadway as they're designing, you're going to be designing. In this case, we're pretending that roadway design's already been completed, and we're just trying to get these nodes or inlets so that we can use them for planned production. So far I've got referenced in from my drainage folder the drainage map, the DR MPR D00, and then the existing drainage, DREX RD01. And then the other two files, if you'll pick Tools Attach again, are going to be from the roadway folder. And I don't think we'll need the topo files from survey. So we're picking 2 from the roadway folder. And that's the alignment file, which is the ALGNRD01. And then the, oh, almost got the wrong one here. And then the one right underneath that, DSGNRD01. I almost referenced in the cross-section file. So I'm going to open both of those files, just attach them, coincident world. You'll basically pick those files and click OK twice. And the alignment that we're working along is going to be this center line here, but you may need to make a change for your alignment file so we can see the tick marks. So on your references, on your alignment file that you referenced in, you'll want to right click on it and pick settings. There's multiple models inside of that alignment file. I'm going to change it from the default model to the ALGN RD50. That's going to give you the station tick marks and the station labels.
Do that one more time.
Yeah. So on your alignment file that's referenced in, if you'll right click on it and go to settings, up at the top you want to change the model to the ALGN RD50. And if you're not already familiar excuse me, with the FDOT workspace, it does not save settings on exit. So you want to hit File, Save Settings, or what's going to happen if you close out or we run into a crash, you're going to end up having to reference in those 4 files again. So the FDOT workspace by default doesn't save the reference files that are attached and levels that are turned on and off in the workspace settings. So you can do File, Save Settings, or you can go to the workspace menu under Preferences and under Operation, check on Save Settings on Exit. I don't know, are there any issues with that? I'm not aware of any issues with that now. There used to be issues with that when you had the older electronic delivery. The older electronic delivery, by opening a file and saving settings on a file, that changed the file enough that it would break the electronic security. Because it changed the file. And the idea behind that whole electronic security was if the file changed at all, it's going to break it. So that was the only issue I'm aware of that we had to instruct all the users, don't save settings on exit, don't save settings on exit. I don't think there's an issue anymore, but I don't know for sure. But for this purpose, the next couple of days, I know it's not going to hurt anything. You're more than welcome to check on save settings on exit, click OK. Then when you exit, it's the same as hitting File, Save Settings. What that saves is it saves your open window configuration, what files are referenced in. It saves all of the window settings and what levels are turned on and off. All right, so now back to page 426. We'll go ahead and start putting in this one node. So most everything that we'll create initially is going to be created from this component menu. So we're going to go into Component, and we're going to pick Node, and we're going to say Add. Now by default, because we set up the preferences to start at S dash, it's going to say S-1. You don't have to accept that. You can backspace over the 1, and you can say that we want to start at S-200 just like you see underneath step 2 here on 426. And then we're going to click OK. And it's going to open up this node configuration dialog. And then whether you're doing plan production or design, let me move that a little bit lower so I can actually point to it because I'm short. You have window center and highlight. So as you have multiple nodes, you can window center and highlight and go back and forth and have them center up on the screen. If you have a node on screen and it doesn't have a label, you don't know what it is, you can click this first little icon and then go double click on the node and it'll take you right to that one in the drainage database. The next one is create a new node. Then there's delete node, and I forgot an area. Is it rename?
Yeah.
Rename node, okay. Now we don't have any stuff to look at yet, so these aren't going to operate. There is something to watch out for with the delete. Excuse me. If I click delete from here, and really delete from just about any place, what will happen is, let's say I just add an additional node here. You don't have to do anything yet. So what happens is if I'm looking at S201 and I hit delete, this delete dialog that comes up always defaults to the first one in the database. It's not deleting that one you're sitting and looking at. There's not an undo. This will burn you. That'll get you. So try and point out all the gotchas in there that we can. That's one of them for sure. So back to 200 here. First section that we need to set up on this inlet is going to be the properties. So this section here on the right hand side, this is coming in from that drainage library. So the node type, it happens to be that we place and create a node that's the first one that's in the library. So you don't really get to do anything here, but if you pick curb and you pick from library item, we can pick all kinds of different curb inlets here. It should be and probably is every type of curb inlet that's in the design manual. It's going to be a whole bunch of them in there. So the one we're picking happens to be first one, inlet curb 1. So it's pretty easy. We don't have to do anything there. This profile is on grade. There's no bypass to node. And then this one does have a node bottom that we're going to check on. And then we can pick what type of bottom we're going to have for this curb inlet. And you're literally picking the two pieces that are built out in the field. The curb inlet is that top piece. That's maybe 1.5 feet or 2 foot thick. And then the bottom is literally the bottom piece that top piece sits on top of. So for this one, we're going to pick P bottom that's 3.5 foot in diameter. So if you pick your node bottom and scroll down, you'll find a P bottom 35 diameter. So the diameters, the way they're set up, 35, there's 3.5 feet. There's a P bottom 40 diameter, or DIA. That one's 4 feet. And we'll go ahead and pick that one, P bottom. And then we need to tell this tool here where it's at in our project. And these tools can get a little finicky. So we're going to move over to the top of page 427. And this inlet's going to be somewhere around the intersection. It's going to end up being, I think, on the left-hand side of about 702. Ends up being about 701 plus 90. So now I'm going to location. And this is why we have in here that GPK file in the project preferences. So we're going to check on chain, and we're going to have this reference to not the existing 61, but the SR61. So 61 was realigned. 61 used to go through here, and now 61 goes here. This happens to be like a high school or something in this area. So we want SR61. And then you can follow the profile. The appropriate profile here is SR61_PR. It'll be the only one that would make sense there. The other one's US 98. Now, coordinate-wise, you could just set your alignment to be at point, and then there's a big station DP button here you could click. And it should, if you were to click that, it should attach that inlet to your cursor. And mine, it doesn't always seem to work right sometimes, but if you were to just place it by clicking this button, it would attach that inlet to your cursor. Now I could have some levels off, so let's see what y'all have going on. So if you hit this big button here, Station DP, and move away from the dialog box, do y'all have the whole inlet shown or just kind of the bottom? So hit the big button and just move out on screen.
Mine looks like yours.
Mine has the whole thing.
All right. So how many people have the whole thing? All right. You win. So if you don't, let's see if we can figure out how to fix it, because that's part of class. Try hitting apply and then click the button again. That won't fix it. Still just got those pieces attached. Don't do anything else yet, but I'm going to hit apply and close out of that dialog and come back to it. Let's see if that would fix it. We're going to say component node edit. This is only if it didn't work. Well, it worked, it just didn't do what we wanted it to do. Oh, same thing, that's not going to fix it. I'm just trying a variety of things so we can see what we need to do, because you'll run into this. Did you run into line? Oh, okay, I got you.
And for some reason, it's not finding the right part.
There's a level off.
Yeah, what's
Hit a line and get it just one time, and it'll be on top.
yeah. Mine is it's a level off.
Yeah, but you're still not aligned.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. Since we did choose to override that level that these normally sit on. So here's what's happening on mine. But there's another thing that we'll want to check. So if you go here to Project Preferences, when I pick the plan symbology, I put everything on this miscellaneous 0 level. So I had everything on miscellaneous 0, and I had that level turned off. So
I'm sure mine's the same thing.
So if you'll go up to, should be a little yellow stack of folders. It's going to say level display. If you'll click on that, you're going to see that miscellaneous 0 is off. It's got a white background. Left click on miscellaneous 0, that'll turn that level on. Now you might find out that there's another issue, just like I have here. I have now that I can see it, I've got the top of the curb inlet, and then I've got the bottom, but they're not lined up. So we'll show you how to line those up. So that was my fault there for forgetting I was overriding that with that miscellaneous 0 level. Now I know we're not placing it in the correct location yet. Just wanted to troubleshoot and make sure it was going to work fine. So what you might see once we've got this level turned on, it might look somewhat like mine, where I have the top portion of it, but the bottom portion isn't lined up. That's pretty common. So if you go back to your properties section here on the left, down on the bottom there's an align button. So if you click that align button, there's two adjust buttons. And sometimes you have to adjust the bottom. Sometimes you have to adjust the curb inlet. Basically what you end up doing is you end up hitting one or both of these adjust buttons until they line up on the right hand side where it says align cells, and then you click OK. And then hit apply, and then they should line up. I might be a little bit off still, but definitely a lot better. So what I've done so far is I clicked on location, clicked on this button here on the location. It says station DP, click to place the inlet, and then hit apply. But I think the first time you do that, the bottom and top might not be lined up. So if the bottom and top aren't lined up, you can go back to your properties section here under options, and if you click down in the very bottom right this align button, it's going to give you two adjust buttons that don't adjust it live until you click OK, but you can hit these adjust buttons and eventually you're going to get the top and bottom of this to line up pretty well. So as I'm hitting the adjust button, you'll see that right hand side is going to line these up as best it can. So once they're aligned on this little right hand side preview, if you hit OK and hit apply, they'll be lined up as good as it can. It still may not be exact, but it'll be a lot closer than 3 or 4 feet off like mine was a minute ago. All right, so that I just wanted to make sure things were working in general. I just clicked location and I clicked out here and put it in just some location I could see it. The actual location that we want to have this at is at 701 plus 90 at an offset of minus 44.5. Now I think you're going to see, is if we follow the book here, I think we'll see that it doesn't quite look correct. But we'll give it a couple of tries here. So I'm sitting on the location option, and I'm going to change this alignment excuse me, to tangent to element. And it's real tough to see, but just to the right of there, tangent to element, there's a little tiny button that says select MS alignment element. And if you click that button, you're going to pick this edge of pavement here, this white proposed edge of pavement, right around 702. So I'm picking the left-hand edge of pavement on 702. I'm clicking it once to highlight it, and then I'm clicking a second time in a blank area to accept it. And that's going to let me specify a station and an offset, and it should keep the inlet aligned to that element. So your station here is 701.90. You don't have to type the plus mark. Once you hit tab, it'll throw in the plus mark for you. And then it's probably going to move it directly to that station. You'll have to check on offset, and since it's left, you'll type minus 44.5. And that should put in the inlet correctly. The outer parts of it touch the edge of pavement. Sometimes when you're placing these, they'll be flipped. So sometimes when you're placing these, they might have it where it's way out here on the side, or maybe the curb inlet's out in the middle of the road. That's what this mirror node option is for. If you need to flip the direction of that inlet or this node, you check on mirror node and hit apply. Now that's not the case we have here. So mirror node is unchecked. What it does is it just reflects or flips that inlet direction. Now once you have this set up and recognizing the station, you could still hit this station DP button, and now this is going to go ahead and slide along that edge of pavement out there. So if you weren't given a station, then you could click that big button and you could go out here and you could snap to a location if you wanted to, or you could just kind of eyeball it and get it close to a station and then maybe clean that station up. Maybe I want 703 even or something. The other option that I've used here before, besides tangent to element, is tangent on element. You do the same thing in that you double click on the element after clicking that icon. That one in this case wouldn't work quite right. And here's the reason. When you do tangent on element, it's putting the center of that structure along that element. That's probably not going to work right. So that's why we're doing tangent to element. Yeah, the insertion point for this guy now is right there. Yep. Yep. That's why you want to use the tangent to element instead of tangent on element. Or if you wanted to, you could change that insertion point, but I don't know if that's going to mess up something later. All right. So that should give you this inlet at 70190, and it should line up with the EP fine. If you have not yet hit apply. That should show it up on screen.